Who's here for the first time to a High NY event? Wow, cool, cool. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Who's a familiar face who we brought back, the veterans? Nice, awesome. Thanks for coming back, guys. I'm so excited for this evening. Before we get into anything, I have to thank one very special person who, without her, none of this, we wouldn't be here right now. And that's Ali from Harlem Garage. So, quick round of applause. I gotta give you guys the quick story of, like, you know, I talk to a lot of venues about doing events like this, and they look at me like, you're absolutely crazy as soon as I say the word cannabis. And I'm so grateful, and we're all really fortunate to have this home tonight, because Ali was like, hey, I'm a business person. I don't care what we're talking about. If it makes money, if entrepreneurs are into it, let's do it. So thank you for having, tell them a little about Harlem Garage, this beautiful space.
Well, thank you guys for coming. This is a very big crowd. Harlem Garage just opened a year and a half ago. We're the first incubator space, co-working space in Harlem, so this is very exciting. And more importantly, it's a community base, really community. You can feel that here. And I run the space, so if anybody's interested in co-working, daily passes, and doing future events, I am here. You can contact me. And good luck tonight. I'm excited to see what happens tonight.
Me too. The event tonight is high tech. So, obviously we're in a co-working space. Why are we doing high tech? My background is in the tech world. I'm a former Googler. I worked in the New York City startup scene, and then I quit that to be an entrepreneur, my lifelong dream. Woo! And I do that as a life coach, and then I accidentally came to a High NY event one day, and it's funny, Josh, who started High NY, the story of the founding of High NY is very tech related. Now, Josh and I went to high school together in Manhattan. He bought the domain High NY like 10 years ago, because he wanted to build a social network for New York City high school kids. And then this thing called Facebook happened, so he decided, I'm not going to build that social network, but he had the domain, and a few years later it became a different kind of social network, High NY. So thanks for being a part of it, guys. I'm going to do a quick presentation about, the number one question that I get asked after any of these events is, how do I get into the industry, and how do I open a dispensary in New York? I think those are silly questions, guys. If you're a new entrepreneur, or if you're just looking at this space, cannabis isn't new. It's been around for a long time. People have been operating in this business for a long time. So to just come in and start a dispensary in New York, you'll see with a later presentation that it's not an easy thing to do, but the good news is there's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs in this space, even if you're based in New York and it's not legal here except for, I'll call it a lousy medical law, to be nice, because I promised Ali I would be nice today. I have a deck somewhere, and I'm hoping it will magically appear, and then I could share some opportunities and insights. Ooh, there it is. Nice. Can you go to the next slide, please? So really quickly, why tech, besides the fact that we're in Harlem Garage? Not to get stoner philosophical on you guys, but what is technology? Like, what does that word mean? It's, but seriously, like, if you look it up, it's such a vague definition. Thank you. And it's just like anything that allows you to do something better or solve a problem is technology. So I want to challenge you guys to understand that cannabis is a powerful, amazing, widespread global technology, one of the oldest in the world. And we've recently found out on the medical side that it helps cure or treat a lot of diseases. This is not the full list, but this is just one of the uses of cannabis. And I know people here are a little more business-minded, so we'll talk about that opportunity if we go next slide. I want to point this out because there's a lot of history to the cannabis movement and the industry. It's not a brand new industry, like I said, it's just a brand new industry as far as having regulation and being above ground. But if you look at this stat, now is the time to get involved. Actually yesterday or last year or even before that. But now is the time to get involved. If you are serious about being in this industry, public opinion has never been higher. We've never had this much momentum. And I really like this graph because 1990, when things started really going up for public opinion about cannabis, that's around the time the internet really started going mainstream and everyone in America started getting access to internet. And I think it's because we have information and we can meet and do stuff like this and people can learn about cannabis that people have started to support the legalization, especially when you learn the history of it, which I won't get into. Next slide. These are the numbers from the most recent ArcView report. They're saying that cannabis is a $35 billion industry by 2020. Now, these numbers are really up in the air. I mean, the expert speakers will talk more about these numbers, but you know, the range is 10 to 120 billion. If you go to the next slide, you'll see how that compares to the alcohol and tobacco industry. You know, but look at that range of cannabis where we're not exactly sure how big it is, and that's the opportunity of just the plant that is sold. That doesn't take into account any of the other businesses, which I gotta tell you is exponentially more than just the sale of the plant. So if we go to the next slide, just a little about New York. The medical law, which I called lousy, is, in my opinion, that because you know, we're a big state and they're giving out 5 licenses for 20 dispensaries. You have to cover a lot of ground, and you know, these are the estimates. These are actually very lowball estimates of the amount of cannabis that's sold in New York. And that's just cannabis sales. It's $1 billion a year industry. That doesn't talk about any of the other products associated, any of the other services. But you know, I wanted you guys to have these numbers in mind as we go through some of the other metrics. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about a couple of different opportunities for innovators and entrepreneurs that I've seen so far. Number one is new product lines. You know, concentrates, dabs as they're called on the street, waxes, tinctures. You know, all of this stuff was not available for the mainstream consumer until years ago. I think in Colorado, something like 30% of regular users have switched to concentrates primarily in a year, from 3% to 30%. These are new product lines, new ways of using cannabis medicine and cannabis the plant that we don't know a lot about. I did a lot of research. High Times said that dabs have existed since the year 2000. It's not a long time. Cannabis has existed since like 8000 BC. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for tech innovation specifically, in that all of these extracts and oils, they come from really complex engineering processes that are way over my head. I can't get into them today, but there's a lot of tech involved. Next slide, please. Infused products. You know, the New York law doesn't even allow for flour, so it's only going to be concentrates and some of the stuff we saw on the previous slide as far as the medical patients and what they have access to. But in Colorado, in Washington, and the other states, you know, these products are doing a lot of business. Matt, the next speaker, will tell you a little bit about how much of the market infused products do. But the point is, these companies are working on licensing deals right now to get into New York. So if you're waiting for New York to go legal, you're missing the boat. The time is yesterday. So, you know, people love cooking with cannabis. There's going to be cannabis classes and restaurants and all this good stuff. But the opportunity is here to be involved without necessarily touching the plant. Next slide, although that touches the plant. Software. So, you know, we had Cy Scott from Leafly speak a few months ago. They're a $20 million a year business. You know, Weed Maps is around the same revenue. Mass Roots is a social network that's like Instagram for the cannabis community. You know, these aren't, no offense to any of these companies, these aren't particularly innovative in the sense of, you know, business people came up with something brand new, like, you know, Yelp for dispensaries. Someone here could have built that. A lot of people here could have built that, but the fact is, that's a $20 million a year company. They don't touch the plant, and they're not even in every state yet. So, there's a lot of opportunity. I have the cash register because New York is seed to sale. You know, point of sale systems, tracking, you know, the actual product as it goes through the cycle. There's a lot of opportunity here. Up top, those are 2 delivery services that are like the Uber for pot. They're in San Francisco, but you know, New York probably wouldn't allow for something like that, but there's opportunity in just software, guys. Next slide, please. Hardware. This right here is a $30,000 smoking glass pipe, I guess we'll call it, for tobacco use only. $30,000. I talked to an art dealer who works in only glass pieces, and he was like, Prohibition ends, man. We're gonna have the pre-Prohibition art. That's gonna be through the roof. Like, but that's kind of a joke. But you know, the pens, you're gonna see a lot of those in New York next year. Once there's concentrates in a major way in New York, you're gonna see a lot of those. If you've been on the West Coast anytime recently, you see a lot of those today. If you want to talk to Oleg, who's in the crowd today, he's starting a company, or well started, but anyway, lots of opportunity here. Next slide, please. Retail. Guys, that's a dispensary in Colorado. I'm just saying. And that's a pot vending machine. Okay? Like, these are 2 things that didn't exist like a few years ago. And, you know, these touch the plant, yes, but there's an opportunity to be, you know, the Ralph Lauren of dispensaries or whatever fancy brand. Next slide, please. Education. This is one of my favorite because it goes beyond commerce with cannabis. There's a lot of other elements to this. The DARE program, how many of you are a product of the New York City Public School like I am? All right, okay. So you guys have seen this at some point in your childhood, and you're still here, so it probably didn't work that well. They spent over $1 billion a year on DARE for the last, I don't know, 20-something years. That's a $20 billion opportunity to do a better education program for our school children, for parents, for senior citizens, for medical patients. That's an opportunity for an entrepreneur to step up to. Next slide. These are examples of cannabis schools that exist today. They teach, those are some of the classes, edibles operation. That sounds fun. But, these businesses are crossing state lines. They're doing, CCI does shows in New York. You could go get certified in, master growing in a day. Are you going to be a master grower in a day? Probably not, but, these are businesses that are making money today. Next slide, please. Energy. This is a big one that not a lot of people talk about. When I found that out, I was pretty amazed that 1% of all our country's energy goes to growing cannabis. Those 2 companies I had over there, who knows Zynga by round of applause there? No? All right. Zynga is a big, what they do, Words with Friends, or one of those big Facebook games. They had a big IPO, all that stuff. One of either their founding CEO or founding CTO founded Cerna, which made the HVAC process, which is like probably the least sexy business in cannabis, which is like, air conditioning and climate control in the grow houses, that kind of stuff. They made that a little more energy efficient, and they're doing multi-million-dollar numbers right now. And by the way, that's applicable to energy tech outside of cannabis for everything. So big opportunity there. Next slide, please. Professional services. So HR and staffing. Lawyers love pot, is what I've learned in the last few months of doing this, because it creates work for them. MedMen, those are consultants that can help you set up your dispensary if you're fortunate enough to get the license. Security. You guys probably know that there's not banking available for most cannabis businesses. They're mostly cash only. This has actually created a lot of jobs for veterans, which is really nice. So thanks, Cannabis, for that. Business-to-business conferences. Rudy's in the room here somewhere. He's throwing Canatopia Con at the Meadowlands. Like, he's not touching the plant there, I promise. A lot of ways to get involved. The big one I don't have on here is marketing. There are so many marketing, advertising shops that are just cannabis industry focused. And I gotta tell you, the cannabis companies that are gonna be advertising will have multi-billion-dollar budgets. So there's gonna be some serious opportunity there if professional services is for you. Next slide. Tourism. We can't do this in New York today, but it's kind of unfair because Denver, Seattle, they have all these businesses that are gonna get the experience. They have the dispensary and grow tour, just like you go to Napa Valley and sip your fine wine. You could go, check out the grow and sample some of their finest. They have movie theaters that are cannabis friendly. The Bud and Breakfast, they spoke a few months ago, where it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a hotel. This is gonna come to New York. You guys should talk to Joe from the XX. They're working on something in this space. Very exciting New York City startup. Next slide. Media, entertainment, and lifestyle. Who knows Snoop Dogg? Who's heard of Snoop Dogg?
Yeah.
Right? Like, who knows that Snoop Dogg smokes pot? Right?
No, really?
I heard. It's for glaucoma. But like him and Wiz, they built brands. Obviously, they're talented musicians, but they built brands around appealing to cannabis culture, and that's a huge opportunity. They touch the planet. But like Huff socks, those guys did several millions of dollars on, socks with cannabis leaves on them. Like, that's not all that crazy, but a couple of $1 million, is that a good business, guys, like for socks? Vimeo and High Maintenance, I don't know if you guys watch the show, great show, but as far as tech goes, Vimeo's that was their first paid content that they did, was High Maintenance, a show about pot that people actually pay for, like people paying for media online. Wow, guys. High and Y, yeah, shameless plug. Next page. Other, this was my favorite one. I didn't mean it like that, guys. Not like my favorite. Oh my gosh. When people join the meetup, I ask them what their favorite thing to do using cannabis, if they're a cannabis user. And there was like a 2-week period where every answer was sex. So I don't know what that says about this group or about our community, but Cosmo's writing about this, guys. This isn't like, so there's opportunity for other lifestyle businesses in here. Next slide, please. Boom, social enterprise. This is my favorite part because money is all beautiful and nice and fantastic, and I'm sure we all like it and want more. But entrepreneurship is about solving problems. It's about seeing how things ought to be, not how they are. And unfortunately, cannabis prohibition's created a lot of problems, in my opinion. And some of these are 10x problems. I use that because my old bosses, Larry and Sergey, like that term. In tech, some of you might not know, 10x is like, let's solve a problem that's 10 times bigger than what our competitors are doing. Let's do something that's going to grow our company by 10 times. Let's not be incremental. Let's think of big solutions for big problems. And this framework really drives a lot of innovation, in my opinion. Now, I was really crunching through the numbers and wanted to find a 10x stat I could use that would tie into cannabis. And would you believe it? I found one, guys. And it's so appropriate for my hometown of Brooklyn and Harlem, our home tonight, that if you were a young man of color, you're 10 times more likely to get arrested for cannabis possession than if you're a young man who looks like me. Now, I'm not going to get into the political side or how big a problem this is, but this is a big problem that's going to take a lot of big thinkers and big doers to help solve, and it's going to be, a 10x solution. So there's a lot more to this than just turning a buck and just opening a dispensary and selling pot. There's a lot beyond cannabis than what you might think of. So just wanted to point that out. And what do I have next? The key risks. All right, well, just like every business, cannabis has risks. You know, it's still federally illegal. I mentioned banking. You don't get the #1 tax break that entrepreneurs get if you're dealing with a federally illicit substance. You know, there's a lot of opposition from, you know, the powers that don't want cannabis legalized. And then one thing that I think is really interesting is once the big players come in and optimize the production, the price of pot will actually go down, which is, you know, I'm surprised there's no round of applause, but you guys. And then exit opportunities, like you could IPO your tech company, you could sell it to a bigger company. You're not gonna necessarily, you guys will talk about it, but you know, IPOing your cannabis company is a little different, probably a lot different. Reputation, are you willing to tell people that this is what you do with your life?
Yes.
My mother is ashamed of me, guys. No joke. That's not a joke. She gave me a stern chat yesterday. But you know, this is a risk. Next slide. I'm grounded, guys, for doing this. If you think cannabis is exciting based on some of what we just talked about, can I hear it a little? It's nothing compared to the opportunity in hemp. It's nothing. Straight up. But if you want to hear about that, you have to come back to the next event next month, and we'll talk all about hemp and the environment and that opportunity. But yeah, I wanted to basically share that with you guys to show you that, you know, this is an innovative space to play in. The rules are being written right now. You know, this isn't a new industry. This is a new industry that's coming above ground. In the black market, you know, gray areas are filled with crime. In a legal market, gray areas are filled with regulation. And that's happening right now. And I gotta tell you, from what I've seen in this space so far, the people driving regulation are business people. So if you're an entrepreneur and you have a chance to write in the rules for, you know, a $40 billion, $120 billion plus industry, that's a pretty attractive opportunity from where I stand. I hope that's an attractive opportunity in your eyes, and I hope you learned something from that presentation. And now I'm gonna pass off to the real pros, and you know, first up we have Matt Karnes from GreenWave. I'm gonna let you do the introduction as far as the more technical stuff, so I don't want to botch anything.
Sure.
But you know, I'm just gonna pass the floor over to you.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here. I'm Matt Karnes. I'm the founder and managing partner of GreenWave Advisors. GreenWave was founded, I guess it was back in October, to provide comprehensive research and financial analysis for the emerging legalized cannabis industry. And I guess you can go to the next slide. So what we did in October was first we thought it was very important that the industry, as it is emerging, to have real numbers behind the industry. And we thought that there was nothing really out there that captured the data that was in the legalized market to date. So we analyzed current trends in those markets where marijuana is legally sold and used that as a basis to build an actual model, financial model of the U.S. Marijuana, retail marijuana market. And we did that for the medical, and we did that for the recreational use. I'm a former equity analyst. I worked for Bear Stearns and a couple other sell-side shops, and I also worked at a hedge fund. And I never in a million years thought that I would be back to writing research reports and doing industry analysis, but for some reason, the cannabis industry really captured my interest. And so that's sort of how we started. Go to the next. Although medical marijuana has been legal in some states for a number of years, there's been nobody out there really tracking the information. Now, even though medical marijuana is legal in 23 states right now, it's really only commercially available in a handful of those states. Now, that's all obviously going to change. The market is small, and even though, you know, as I said, there's no commercial availability, in 2014 noticed a significant change in the way that the public has viewed marijuana, and also as in terms of commercialization. Colorado and Washington implemented recreational use programs. Ballot measures passed in November for commercial sale in Alaska, Oregon, and Washington. And as you know, there's legislative measures now in New York, well, that has passed, Minnesota and Maryland. So as more states become legal, it's going to become more and more important that there is details and numbers for investors to look at and get their hands on. Go to the next. So again, what we do is we provide investors with comprehensive financial analysis. We compile data from various state agencies and other sources. And right now we're focusing on industry trends. And what we did recently was we looked at the state of Colorado. You can go to the next slide. It's the first state that has a dual market. The 2014 has a first year of a medical and a recreational use market. And we thought that that would be significant to really take a deep dive and analyze the trends that have occurred during the year. So we just published the state of Colorado, year one. And then really the key finding is that the growth rate in medical marijuana is clearly decelerating. That should really not be a surprise to many people, but we thought it was important to kind of spell it out. And what we see is in 2014, we do a comparison between the medical market and the recreational market, and the darker line is the recreational market. You can see it's on the uptick, and then the medical is kind of sloping downwards. Our long-term view is such that the medical market is sort of at peak or will continue to decelerate, and the recreational market will continue to grow. But that said, the medical market will recalibrate. At some point when big pharma and the biotech firms and so forth come in and really have a defined, targeted product, then the medical market will most likely be redefined. So this is just in the current state of the markets right now. So what we found is that we analyzed data in every county for the last like 5 years. And we identified certain trends in each county, the average spend, patient statistics, et cetera. Pretty much in every metric, we're seeing a deceleration in the growth rates. Registered card holders, new applications, average spend per month. And what we're seeing is that chronic pain, and this should be no surprise to anybody, accounts for about 93% of all the card holders. And so when the recreational market came on board, those patients that had chronic pain are now no longer using a medical marijuana card. They're migrating over to the recreational market. Now you might say, well, why would they do that? Because it's cheaper to purchase, at least in Colorado, medical marijuana, because it's a lower tax rate. But likely it's because of, people don't want to be on the record of being a marijuana user. There's a lot of, maybe it's convenient, maybe the dispensary is closer, there are a lot of variables. But we suspect that over time, and that the fundamentals are going to continue to decelerate in the medical marijuana market, and to really start to grow in the adult use recreational market. And that's kind of it. But I didn't. I just want to talk briefly on the thing. I mean, I can tell you that in our initial industry report, when we went state by state, we analyzed every state where marijuana is legally sold. And we found it was interesting because we found some key similarities in some of these markets. We found that patients on average purchase less than an ounce of marijuana a month. And that's pretty consistent, regardless of the fact that the states allow roughly 2.5 ounces a month. So people are purchasing far less than what's prescribed by law. In Colorado, no surprise, but the months of January and August, there's been consistently an uptick in marijuana purchases, and that's likely due to college students purchasing or getting their cards ahead of the semester to have the flexibility. It's it's pretty obvious. So these are just some of the trends, as time goes on, there's very little information out there right now. So this is not an easy task. But my hope is to continue to do research like this, very detailed analysis, to provide investors with the tools they need to make, the proper investment decisions. This is very high level, but as the industry grows, this will become more and more important. So, I don't know, that's kind of it in a nutshell.